Okay, so we would put this over to the side for just a second. And now, because I like to dip just about everything, I'm going to make a dip for our tofu. All right, so let's start with, we're going to add peanut butter is actually going to be the base. So it's going to be a nice peanut butter or peanut dip.
And again, when you're looking for peanut butter, you want to be sure, oftentimes they use palm oil to help emulsify the peanut butter. So you want to be careful with that. A lot of them have sugar added and all that. And what you're looking for is just peanuts, right?
Just peanuts.
Just peanuts.
Yes. All right. So now we're going to add in, we're going to use a lot of the same ingredients. So
right.
We're going to add in some of our coconut aminos with that peanut butter. Now you are going to, oh, okay, thanks. I'm going to add in some lime. Oh yeah, so good. Okay, and so you have ginger. So make sure you have your microplane ready. And yeah, well, that's that. And you like to tell people.
Oh yeah, so this, I have to tell you, this is one of the favorite culinary tricks that Caryn has ever taught me. She's taught me a lot, but this is a top 5 probably. Because you buy a thing of fresh ginger and you use it in a recipe and you put it in the refrigerator, and a couple weeks later you're gonna do cook another recipe that calls for ginger, and you open up your refrigerator and it's all shriveled up and dried up, kind of nasty. And she says, oh, you don't need to put it in the refrigerator, put it in the freezer and freeze it. And then you just take it out, as she's done, this ginger straight out of the freezer. And then she just grates it, frozen. And it's beautiful. And then you can leave the skin on. And when you're done, you put it back in the freezer. And so instead of the ginger lasting a week or two, it lasts months. Really.
Yes.
So freeze your ginger.
Freeze your ginger.
It's really amazing.
Okay. And then you can put in some, well, actually, see if I can. Our garlic is pretty soft, but I'm going to see if I can't, oh, there you can. Use the microplane for this as well. Just, let's see, we'll do 2 cloves. Maybe not. Maybe. Yeah, we go. Okay, so we have that. And we're going to get these little guys on the back end. These microplanes are the best.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh.
One of my favorites.
And then just a little bit of water, just so I can whisk it. All right, so we're gonna let this sit for just a minute. Now, let's talk about this air fryer.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
So I'm choosing to, I'm choosing to air fry our tofu. It's really nice during the summer because your whole kitchen won't get hot. But it's gonna give us that almost that deep fried texture without adding any oil and hardly any calories.
That's right. That's right. Again, when we talked earlier, especially if you look at obesity rates, you look at diabetes rates, pre-diabetes rates, insulin resistance. And I know Robbie and Cyrus have been on this conference, and Robbie about talking to Mastering Diabetes, talking about that the root cause of insulin resistance is not sugar. It's actually fat.
Too much fat.
Deposits in our muscle and liver cells. And as you mentioned earlier when we were talking about oil-free cooking, oils are ubiquitous. You go to Trader Joe's and you get some really healthy-looking lentil chips, and you look, it's full of oil. So we're getting tons and tons and tons of extra fat. And again, ideally, if you look at ancestral diets, we probably got 10% of our calories from fat. That's like 35 grams a day. And so there's some simple ways to get rid of the fat. Oil-free cooking's one. Air fryer is another, right?
Yeah.
Because, instead of making French fries and fried this and fried that, the air fryer is fantastic.
And if you have an air fryer for as long as I have and used it as many times as I have.
Well, this is like my second favorite, one of my other things you turned me on to.
When I found this. So this is an old school, but I love it. Tried and true. The only thing this does is air fry. It doesn't do everything else. But the basket, which used to be nonstick, isn't so nonstick anymore because it's old and I've used it. until we found parchment paper.
Right, for the air fryer, right?
It
That's
goes
amazing.
right in there,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the air can circulate. Now, let's just pretend, wink, wink, that this has been marinating for 24 hours. And I would put a few cubes in here. I would, let's see, what, 390 degrees, 10 minutes, shake, and then another 5 to 10 more. So we put this in here, turn it on. We're not gonna because it's too loud.
Right.
But Jim, if you want to grab.
Well, why don't I do this? Why don't we take another quick break and we'll finish up the soup.
Oh, okay.
And we'll show you the finished tofu product, and then we'll move on from there to question and answer. So
Yep.
why don't we'll be back in just a couple minutes. We're gonna reset things one for the last time, and we'll see you back in a second.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm ready to eat.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. So let's finish up this soup that has been cooking, and this whole shop smells delicious.
It does. It does.
All right. So what we're going to do, and this is a great way to add more greens to your diet, soups, stews, anything like that.
Yeah.
Throw your greens in there.
It doesn't matter, right? You can switch chart. I mean, I can tell you, I have some green averse. I had some greens averse kids in my family.
Yeah.
And this is a great way to hide the greens, right? Because you can get all that nutrition packed in there. It doesn't really change the flavor too much. And again, it doesn't really matter. Kale, beet greens, Swiss chard, spinach. Great way to increase the nutrition and the fiber in your
And spinach
meal.
is so full of water, this baby spinach, that you can add a ton of it. We've all seen those memes,
right,
where the first frying pan has a mountain full of greens,
right,
and then the next meme, it's like this much.
right.
Okay, so that is already wilted down, and I'm going to add in a little bit of lemon. Now this will brighten it up. This will brighten up your soup. But what most of the time, if I have leftovers, and when I make a soup, I make a ton of soup and eat it all week, right? But leftovers can kind of taste a little, I don't know, just they can lose their luster, right? So if you add brightness from a lemon, you will not get a lemony flavor. It'll bring all the flavors back to life, right? So we're going to add a little bit here just because it's right now. And I'm doing it right now.
And there's another kind of nutrition science reason to add lemon to that soup.
Yeah.
So when we talk about, plant-based diets, one of the nutrients of concerns, especially for premenopausal women, is iron, right? So dietary iron comes in two forms. It comes in what's called heme iron. So heme is hemoglobin. And hemoglobin is the protein in our blood that carries oxygen. It's what makes our blood red, right? So when you eat a piece of, and you're getting that heme iron, where it's actually coming from, and this is really disgusting to think about it, it's coming from some of that dead animal blood that we're ingesting.
No thanks.
Now, our bodies will absorb as much heme iron as we ingest. But here's the problem. Heme iron is highly, highly, highly inflammatory. It's what's called a pro-oxidant. So it can damage DNA. It can cause, a lot of adverse health consequences. It's one of the reasons, by the way, that red meat is associated with an increased risk of both heart disease, but also colon cancer, because the heme iron is damaging the DNA in those cells. It's oxidizing the LDL particles as far as heart disease goes. So there are some people, by the way, who have a condition called hemochromatosis, which is a genetic disorder. It's more common than people think, where we can't metabolize iron very well. And so when we eat all this heme iron, it gets stored in our liver and it can cause all kinds of problems. Now, there is iron in plants.
Yeah.
And in fact, both the lentils and the spinach in this soup are packed full of iron, but it's non-heme iron. So it's much more difficult for our bodies to absorb the non-heme iron. However, if you co-ingest a source of vitamin C, like the lemon juice, with these higher iron foods, you'll see absorption rates of heme iron that equal or surpass. Thank you. I'm drooling, from the food. So you'll see actually higher absorption rates with heme iron, and it's self-regulating. So when our iron stores are replete, we will stop absorbing the extra non-heme iron, right?
Our bodies are so smart.
Yeah, they are. They are. So the idea is just do exactly what Caryn did. When you have, you're making a soup or a stew, you add or a salad, with these high iron foods, the green leafy vegetables, the legumes. You put a little lemon juice. You brighten with a little lime juice. You snack on citrus fruits. Red bell pepper is a great source of vitamins.
I add lemon to my hummus.
Yeah, there we go. That's the same kind of thing. So there's another reason we putting these citrus to dress your soup besides brighten it. It can help with iron absorption.
Yeah, and you know what I'm going to do here is I want to show everyone what the tofu looks like at the end. So we've got some nice, let's see, this right here. You can see how those edges look really, really crispy. Yeah, it looks delicious. And then the soup is, there's just so much going on in here, right?
So much flavor.
So much flavor. Yeah. Okay. So, I think. Yeah. If it's okay if we eat while
we maybe I don't know. We shouldn't eat with our mouth full.
I know.
We'll save this for just after. So I think we're ready to take any questions you might have, and we have another little bit of time.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for that. The very delicious looking demonstration.
Welcome.
So now we are going to begin the Q&A section. And before we open up to the audience and start asking questions, do you guys want to tell us where you can get your books and reach out to you guys?
So the recipes, if anyone's interested, are on the Center for Plant-Based Living's website. Mm-hmm. They're all there. Actually, to make it easier, we were just at the Fairfax Veg Fest 2 weeks ago. And if you go to the blog section of the Center for Plant-Based Living's website, you'll see all those recipes because we did the same shows there.
We did two.
But also you can go to the recipes or you can go to the blog posts. So
you can also link it through. We have our new Doc and Chef. If you go to YouTube and in the information about each segment, there's a link to the recipes in the blog posts, and the recipes are similar. Right. It will be out there.
Yeah.
But this is on your Center for Plant-Based Living website. Yeah.
Great. And then also your YouTube channel again?
The Doc and Chef.
Yep, the Doc and Chef.
The doc and chef. All right, perfect. So we're gonna start opening up to the audience. So thank you for sharing that information. So before I open it up to the audience, I'm just going to go over a couple of things so that people understand how this works. So we don't take questions directly from the chat. Instead, we ask everyone to virtually raise their hand. If you're not sure how to do this, what you need to do is click on the reactions button, second from the right and the bottom of the Zoom window, then click on the raise hand function in the menu that pops up. We will then take questions in the order in which they were received. When it's your turn, I will unmute you and ask you to state where you're from and to ask your question. We ask that everyone keep their questions brief and on topic. We will then mute you. If you do wish to ask another question or a follow-up question, please just raise your hand again and we will get to you assuming we have time. So our first question is going to come from Ruth. Ruth, please let us know where you are and ask your question.
Hi, I'm from Canada, from Toronto, Ontario. And my question has to do with someone who is having to eat low oxalate foods. And that would cancel out the beans, the almonds, spinach, beets, and tofu, soy products. I don't know if anybody there knows very much about oxalates. I certainly didn't, and I know a lot of doctors don't know too much about it. But I was reading a book by Sally K. Norton, and she's a dietitian, and she talks about the effects of having high oxalates. I mean, I know that if you have a problem with kidney stones, you definitely have to go on a low oxalate diet. But aside from that, there are people who have to lower their oxalate intake, and she explains all this in the book. But this sort of eradicates everything, or pretty well, not everything, but so many of the foods that are important on a whole food plant-based diet. I'm just wondering if you know anything about that, and how can we maintain a diet like this? I mean, she says that what is good are all the animal. You could have the animal fats, eggs, and all the things that the guests on this conference are against. So, okay, that's what I want to ask you about.
Thank you.
Yes, Ruth, thank you for your question, and thank you for watching us. We both really appreciate it. I'm going to let the doctor take most of this, but this is something that I like to say just to kind of drive home the point, first of all, with the oxalates. Now, if those oxalates are heavily present in uncooked beans, so I think that you're going to be wanting to find a dentist before you find any other kind of doctor, because nobody is going to want to eat an uncooked bean, right?
That's right.
And so what happens is when you cook the beans and you cook some of the higher oxalate greens and some of these other foods that Sally says are high in oxalates, if you cook them, you cook those dangerous and harmful oxalates out, and the ones that stay are actually beneficial.
No, that's right. So I think, there's a lot of kind of talk out there around, especially in the paleo community, right, or the keto community, about anti-nutrients in food. So that includes phytates, lecithins, oxalates, and things like that. And to Sally's point, it is true that some people who are prone to kidney stones do have to be somewhat careful with oxalates because oxalates can be the nidus, the start the kidney stone formation. However, I know of no sound scientific evidence to suggest that lecithins, phytates, oxalates, in the context of a healthy whole food plant-based diet, has any adverse health effects. It's just not true. And again, a lot of these arguments are, yes, beans have a lot of oxalates. Yes, beans have phytates. Yes,
Grains
beans have
yeah.
Exactly. But as Caryn already said, when we cook these vegetables, we cook the beans, we cook the spinach, that cooks out, if you will, these anti-nutrients. And I mean, again, for those of you who might not be familiar with the blue zones, right? So the blue zones are, Dan Buettner and National Geographic identified 5 different cultures around the world that have exceptional longevity. They have very high rates of people over 100 years old. So it's Okinawa in Japan, and Ikara in Greece, and Sardinia in Italy, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, and then also Loma Linda, California, which we'll talk about in a second. But what do they have in common, right? So if you do a Venn diagram about what they have in common, beans are their primary source of protein, and they eat a ton of green leafy vegetables and on. So if there was somehow some anti-nutrients in these foods, I don't think that they would be the longest lived people in the world. And by the way, the reason Loma Linda, people might ask, well, why in the world would Loma Linda, California be on that list? Well, it turns out Loma Linda, California has one of the highest populations per capita of Seventh-day Adventists, and Seventh-day Adventists follow plant-based diet as part of their religious practice.
I hope that helps, Ruth.
Thank you so much. So our next question is coming from Cheryl. Cheryl, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, I'm from Santa Rosa, California, and thank you so much for the very fun presentation, a fun way to learn. And my question is about coconut and specifically the saturated fat. I know you used coconut aminos, but what about unsweetened coconut milk or unsweetened coconut cream? Do you think it's safe for a healthy person that's oil-free, whole foods, plant-based to use that occasionally in a recipe? Do you ever, what I really want to know is, do you two ever use those things?
Right.
That's what she wants to know.
So again, I think the idea here is, and this is a great question because it gets to the point.
Mhm.
The idea here is, in general, we want to eat our food as close to the ground as it can. So you think about a coconut, right? You've got the coconut milk, the coconut water in the middle, and then you've got the coconut meat. And if you press that meat, you get coconut milk. Or you can really refine it completely and get coconut oil.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So I think shredded coconut is fine. I do use some coconut milk in some recipes. But here's the thing. For people who have really high cholesterol, because you are right, most of the fat in coconut is saturated fat. So people that have really high cholesterol, or in particular, if they're trying to reverse their insulin resistance, you have to be very careful. I do not recommend using coconut milk and such as that in the 3 to 4 months it takes most people to reverse their insulin resistance. I think in the context of a healthy plant-based diet, once you've kind of got your insulin resistance under control, I think it's fine. But again, it needs to be in the context of no more than 30 to 35 grams of total fat a day, right? So if you're using coconut milk, say in a soup, a butternut squash, like I make a Thai curry butternut squash soup that I use coconut milk in, so on that day you probably don't want to be eating handfuls of nuts and things like that.
Yeah, no avocado toast that
Right,
morning.
right, exactly. So I think that coconut milk is okay, but again, the only caution is if you've got insulin resistance, prediabetes, or type 2 diabetes, you do have to be very careful with that in the initial phases where you're trying to reverse your insulin resistance.
Great. Thank you so much, Doctor. Our next question is coming from Evelyn. Evelyn, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my question is about the air fryer. So I know that with high temperatures and high carbohydrate foods, the Maillard reaction causes acrylamides in foods. And so I'm wondering if this is happening with the high heat in the air fryer. I know there's only a little bit of sugar in those coconut aminos, there's carbohydrates in the beans, and so I know it's a no-no really for potatoes and really high starchy foods. But what about anything happening with the tofu?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So the acrylamides you're talking about, you are correct. When we cook meat in particular at a high level, it does create acrylamides, which have been shown to be carcinogenic and such like that. But it's not the Maillard reaction isn't just with the sugar. It's a reaction between the sugar and the protein. And because the makeup of as we talked about in our very first segment, because the protein content of these vegetables is much lower and it's a different makeup of amino acids, you really don't have to worry too much about it, frankly. Now, deep frying food is a different story. That's why we use the air fryer. That's another reason, by the way, that cooking oil-free is important, because when we cook oils at a high temperature, that it's above their smoke point, right? And olive oil, for example, has a pretty low smoke point. It makes what are called trans fats, which are like really bad for you, heart disease and things like that. So again, that's why the air fryer is such a powerful tool. But I don't think you have to worry about the acrylamides when you're using veggies in an air fryer because it's where the acrylamides come from. It's a reaction between the sugar and the proteins, and because of the different protein mix, it's been shown. There's some research around that.
Doctor, you just mentioned heating up oil and that not being necessarily good. There's also talk of oil becoming carcinogenic when you heat it up.
That's right.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah, it's the same idea. These trans fats, it develops, AC. I'm blocking on the name, but there's some chemical reactions that occur with the oil that create these carcinogens. Also, like smoking meat, same thing. Cooking meat at a high temperature, cooking food, frying food. Again, that's the acrylamides and all that, those things. And so you're right. It changes the chemical properties of the oil and makes them much more highly inflammatory and bad for our DNA and our cholesterol molecules and things like that. It creates a lot of oxidative stress.
Thank you for that answer. Our next question is coming from Kay. Kay, please state where you're from and ask your question.
Hi, I'm from Wisconsin. I just wanted to ask a follow-up question on the oxalates. I understand that oxalates can prevent calcium absorption. And so I was curious about that in relation to bone health.
So again, like I said earlier, you're right, high oxalate foods, that's again, one of the arguments around the anti-nutrient properties of things like oxalate. Phytates fall into that same category. Phytates can block the absorption of things like calcium. So again, when we cook food, so for example, when you cook spinach, the oxalate content drops between 50 and 80%, right?
Between what? Say that again.
50 and 80%.
50 to 80%
less oxalates when we cook spinach, for example. So again, I think if you're eating a well-balanced whole food plant-based diet with a combination of some raw foods, some cooked foods, again, it's just not something you need to worry about.
Great, thank you very much. So, so with like chickpeas and quinoa, I'm going to ask you some, a little of a cooking question here. Chickpeas and quinoa, what would make those taste good? What would you add to them? Is oil okay to add to them?
Chickpeas and quinoa.
Quinoa, yeah.
Oh,
Quinoa, not necessarily together, just kind of things that are people I think consider plain.
and you spice up your foods. Yeah.
Yes, there you go.
I gotta tell you, I mean, the spice drawer is my friend. There is one. Let me get that, the 21 seasoning. There's one. If you're watching your sodium intake, there is one seasoning that I absolutely love, and all my students here always just get a kick out of it. And in fact, in Christmas, I had a Christmas big dinner party, and I gave everybody a bottle of this, and they all laughed at me because they said, "Where'd you get it from your back room? Right? You didn't go out and shop for it," because I had so many of them. It's Trader Joe's 21 seasoning salute. They always have it. It's $1.99. Has 21 herbs in it. It's fantastic. I put it in your quinoa. You could put it over chickpeas. You could put it into this chickpea salad. I definitely put it in my burger mixes, pastas. If I make a pizza, it goes on top of that. It goes in my salad dressings. So open up your spice drawer and just have a good time. Really, that's what it's all about.
Right. I mean, it's interesting when I look back before I was plant-based, and when I used to cook, most of the flavor came from salt, right?
I know, now it doesn't.
And now, you discover all of these amazing flavors in the spice drawer, like you said, that I've never heard of half of them, right? Like cardamom, like we've heard of cardamom, right?
Well, I mean, Jim makes, he mentioned earlier, he makes this chickpea salad, a version of it, but with curry and dates.
Right. No, exactly.
There's so much.
And the other thing is, just speaking of health, I mean, some of the most powerful antioxidants, anti-cancer foods out there are herbs and spices, right? You look at things like turmeric, which is curcumin. So curcumin is a very, very potent antioxidant, anti-cancer compound. The quercetin in the garlic, which you can use to flavor foods, but even things like cinnamon and ginger. Yeah. I mean, the list goes. I mean, we could have a whole 2-hour lecture just on the health benefits of these individual spices, and we're going to get to some of those on our Doc and Chef show a little bit further down the road, where we're going to do shows on some of these specific spices. So again, it's really a playground, right?
Yeah.
To experiment around, and it's great.
And now you mentioned a few spices. Are there any that you think are like really, really like the best ones as far as if you want to add the highest nutritional value to their meals? Which ones would you choose? And then also, how are they easy to cook with? Are they easy to prepare food with so it tastes good?
So I would say the turmeric is probably the highest, at least one of the highest anti-inflammatories.
Right.
Now, and you don't need a whole lot of it. It does have a pretty earthy flavor, so it might be something that you want to get used to. The curries are good. I love.
They're turmeric based, right?
And then, but also your body doesn't absorb those very easily, those anti-inflammatory properties from the spices very easily. So we want to help it out by adding just a little bit of ground black pepper.
Right. So black pepper has shown, so curcumin is the active anti-inflammatory, anti-cancer compound in turmeric, and black pepper increases the absorption by about 40%. So turmeric, I agree, turmeric, and there's a lot of places you can hide turmeric. I love to make a tofu scramble. And you massage some turmeric in there, and guess what? It looks like eggs, right? And you add a little black salt or kala namak, which is a volcanic salt used in northern Indian cooking. It gives that eggy flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So I put turmeric in a lot of stuff, and you can put a little bit. I mean, it has a little bit of earthy flavor, but a little bit. You can throw it in pretty much anything you want.
We could have thrown it in this soup.
Yeah,
we
you
wouldn't
have known. So
yeah.
that's an easy one, and what's interesting about turmeric, by the way, there's some interesting research fairly recently that looked at people with chronic degenerative arthritis who took turmeric supplements compared to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. That's Motrin, Aleve, ibuprofen. The benefit from the turmeric equaled that of the drugs without any.
Can you believe that? Isn't that crazy?
So when I was training for Ironman, I actually was taking a turmeric capsule just to be sure I was getting all that anti-inflammatory compounds in my body.
Thank you. And you mentioned black pepper to help absorb the turmeric. Does that work for other things? Does black pepper help absorb food in general, or nutrients from food in general, or is it unique to turmeric?
It's unique to turmeric.
Yeah.
Black pepper has its own set of
true.
health benefits. Again, all these compounds have anti-cancer, antibacterial.
We were just
properties.
reading about the fat. Didn't ground black pepper
help burn fat?
Help burns fat also.
Right.
So add it to everything.
Right.
All right. Sounds good. Our next question is coming from Ruth. Ruth, where are you from? And ask your question.
Hi, this is a follow-up question.
Okay.
I'm from Canada. I was already asking you about the oxalates. Now I want to ask you about the tofu. I don't have an air fryer. How would you guide somebody to cook that, let's say in the oven, and at what temperature?
So,
yeah.
Okay. Do you have a convection setting on your oven?
Yes, I do.
Good. So then just line a baking sheet with some parchment paper and do exactly what we did today. Marinate and lay it all out on that parchment paper on the pan. And there's usually about, a 25-degree difference. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I'm thinking probably 15 minutes at 425, and then take a look at it, flip them all over, and then give it half that amount of time, same temperature, and see where you are. Now, here's the thing with this tofu. Some people like it really well done on the outside. Sometimes people just want just a little bit of color change and still a little soft. It's totally up to you. So whenever you find that right temperature time combination, write it down, put it in your phone, something. But you'll be fine in the convection oven.
The other nice thing about this tofu, by the way, depending on what marinade you use, you can just throw this in the refrigerator. You can use it to dress a salad.
Oh, use it all week.
Use it as a snack. I mean, it's a great way to add, again, get that soy and the protein and the fiber that we all need. And it's very versatile, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could skewer it up with vegetables and put it on the grill.
Yep.
Oh, that sounds great. All right. Our next question is coming from David. David, please ask your question.
Hi, thank you very much. This is David from Framingham, Massachusetts. And my question is, what are your thoughts about roasted nuts and seeds? I've heard some thoughts from some of the speakers, even here, that roasted nuts and seeds are like, heated oil, that carcinogen. Would like to understand and hear your thoughts about this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know of any solid research to suggest that roasted nuts are carcinogenic. I mean, again, the thing is, like anything, you wouldn't want to sit down and eat a pound of roasted nuts at a setting, right? But I think roasted nuts every now and then. Now, like for me, the main nut I use, three nuts I use, and they're not roasted, are walnuts, almonds, and cashews, and I get them unroasted. I think if you have a roasted nut every now and then as a snack, I don't think you're probably more worried about the salt than anything.
Well, I think that if you are out shopping, then buying raw is the best.
That's right.
But I would imagine, I think that I have actually read some research on this. It's been a while though, so I'm a little bit rusty on it. But because of the high temperatures and the naturally occurring oils in the nuts, there is
a chemical reaction.
There is a little bit of a chemical reaction. But if you're eating copious amounts, so if you really like to snack on nuts a lot, then I would say go to raw, actually most of the time. And if you really like those roasted nuts, maybe every fourth or fifth time you go to the grocery store, that's when you get your roasted nuts. But I would say go for the raw. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have, there's some dishes like around Thanksgiving, I might do some roasted Brussels sprouts and throw a few pecans in there. So they're kind of somewhat roasted. I don't know of any solid research that's really looked at. I mean, as you know, nutritional research is notoriously difficult to do. And to trying to put, take 10,000 people and half of them on roasted nuts and half of them not, and control for all the other nutritional variables, it's kind of hard that's research that really can't be done. I mean, I think you are correct. There may be some theoretical concerns, but I think roasted nuts in moderation, sparingly are probably okay.
Yeah.
And really looking for the unroasted nuts, for when you're using them from a culinary standpoint.
Unsalted, unroasted.
Right, unsalted.
Thank you. All right. Question on nitric oxide. What foods contain nitric oxide, and what are the health benefits of it?
Go first, and then I'll give you the foods. Right? Yeah. So nitric oxide. So nitric oxides are very, very important, fundamentally important for what's called endothelial function. So our blood vessels have a single cell lining called the endothelium, and for our vascular system to work appropriately, that those blood vessels need to dilate and constrict physiologically when they need to. And one of the problems is because of the Western diet, people develop endothelial dysfunction. And so our blood vessels can't constrict and dilate. That puts you at increased risk for things like heart disease. It's actually the root cause of erectile dysfunction.
Right.
And a lot of people now think that erectile dysfunction is the canary in the coal mine for heart disease. And this is a situation where size matters, right? And what I mean by that is, the penile artery is pretty small, the coronary artery is pretty big. You get 50% blockage in your coronary artery. That might be some problems down the road, but in the short run, not that big a deal. You get 50% blockage in this little artery. Well, next thing you know, you've got erectile dysfunction. So, and there are other things, things like smoking and blood pressure and all that, which can affect it. But there are foods, which Caryn's going to talk about in a minute, which activate nitric oxide. And I can tell you there's some fascinating research in the endurance athlete literature that by using foods that are high in that activate nitric oxide, you can increase your endurance performance by up to 10 to 15%. And again, because now you're able to deliver more blood to your muscles, you're able to clean out that lactic acid, and when you're done exercising. And I can tell you that I discovered that again when I was at 60 years old training for an Ironman. And I can tell you, I made liberal use of these high nitric oxide foods. And I think it's one of the things that helped me recover faster, not get sore, not get stiff. So nitric oxide foods.
So what you're looking for are foods that are higher in nitrates, not nitrites, nitrates, Nitrate. And what happens is when you eat these nitrates, that you create more nitric oxide by chewing them. So the saliva in your mouth then mixes with the nitrates in the vegetables and creates nitric oxide. Now it also does that in your gut. So your body, first of all, your body makes its own nitric oxide up until you're about 50 years old. And then every 10 years, you start to lose 10% of that, right? So you need to backfill, or you need to create your own nitric oxide. And again, you do these with these dark leafy greens. Beets are a big one.
Yeah.
Beet greens are a big one. And there's really walnuts.
Arugula,
the dark leafy
rhubarb
greens.
too.
Yes.
Rhubarb.
So, but there's even more to this whole nitric oxide story. Is number one, you want to not always have smoothies, because you want to chew these nitrate heavy vegetables, foods, plants. And then you want to make sure that it gets in your saliva, so you're making it here. And then it's also converting with the acid in your stomach. So along this storyline, you might want to, I did a blog post on this, and I also did a television segment on this. You might want to, if you're on any kind of, if you use mouthwash, so a therapeutic mouthwash, you may want to stay away from, because if you are eating these nitrate heavy vegetables in hopes to create more nitric oxide, if you're chewing that, but you use a therapeutic mouthwash, then you're not going to be creating that nitric oxide. And also, if you are using a PPI, not a PPI for,
PPIs are called proton pump inhibitors, and they're designed to decrease stomach acid.
So like if you're taking something like Nexium or something like that, then that is going to control the acid production in your gut. And therefore you will not be making as much nitric oxide as you want to. So look at your mouthwash, look at your PPIs. Those are just some things you might want to look at. And if you're looking for more information on this, if you go to our website, go to the blog, I did a long blog post and a television segment on it as well. So, but you can just Google. I mean, if you're just looking for nitrate heavy plants or foods, that's an easy Google also.
Right. And if you want to do a deeper dive, you just go to something like PubMed and put in, beats and athletic performance. You'll see some of that research. And it also, it really is almost nature's Viagra as well, because it does help men restore that endothelial function, to allow them to attain and maintain, erections and things like that. So
hope that helps. I know that was long-winded.
No, that was great. That was great. So, we only have like a minute left. So I'm going to ask you a simple question. Okay, so raw organic seeds, are they all good, or are there ones that are not good, or some better than others, like sesame, sunflower, pumpkin, flax, chia, hemp, poppy?
Yeah, no, I think they're all good. The only caveat is they do have a lot of fat. So again, if you've got prediabetes, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, you do have to be a little bit careful about over consuming the nuts and seeds. And they're an excellent source of, not so much the poppy seed, but the chia seed, the hemp seed, the pumpkin seed, excellent source of plant-based omega-3 fatty acids.
Oh, but can I just say,
Yeah.
if you're going to have flax seeds,
Crush them. You got to grind
Crush
it, right? Yeah. And Dr. Greger talks about actually grinding the chia seeds as well, to really increase the surface area so you can absorb more of those omega-3s. So absolutely nothing wrong. Sesame seeds are a great source of calcium, actually. The only caveat with the nuts and with the seeds and then nuts, the same category, is just the fat. And so it needs to be in the context of 30 to 35 grams of fat a day, especially if you're trying to reverse your insulin resistance.
Great. Thank you so much. This is a really great demonstration. I'm going to definitely check out the recipes. As I can tell in the chat, a lot of our audience are going to as well. So with that, I'm going to open up the mics and unmute the audience. You can hear a whole cacophony of thanks from the audience.
We love you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Plant power.
Really, really interesting. I can't wait to
Thank you
try
very much.
tofu in there.